Kia ora here, good evening and welcome to the Union Report, where we review the news week through the lens of industrial disputes with union leaders, commentators and politicians. Joining me tonight to discuss events is President of Unite, columnist and political commentator Matt McCartin, and the Labour Party spokesperson for Labour, List MP Darian Fenton. Welcome to you both. Coming up tonight, issue 1, with industrial action looming, has the government's bigger classroom sizes been a failure? Issue 2, and the battle of hearts and minds for the left, who is more of an ally to the union movement, the Greens or Labour? And issue 3, are the jobless unprepared for the realities of the workforce? Plus we'll wrap the show with a final thought, but let's start with tonight's issue 1. The government seems to have horribly underestimated the response around the country to larger classroom sizes. How has it come to this? Matt, the NZEI, NZAIMS, NZSTA, PPTA, NZPF, SPANZ and PPTA Secondary Principals Council have all come out against this. How have the government blundered so badly?
Well, I think it's probably the minister is inexperienced. I just can't believe she gave them this gift. For $40 million it was going to save. Yeah. She has given all the education sector a golden opportunity to unite. That also is that it's an issue which every parent in the country is not going to believe the minister's spin, that actually it's going to make no difference. We've been brought up to believe smaller class sizes is better for our kids, particularly now that what you've got, the saving is so small, but what we've got is that the teacher unions have been in conflict about the whole staffing levels. This now just gets away on the minister. I mean, this is probably the worst week this minister has ever had. I think that Key has had to step in, but even that looks, because he's being quite belligerent about it. And one of the things which Key, and Darren will know this, when you scratch him, you start to see a face that most people don't see. You saw that pettiness this week, and oh well, we're going to put it on hold now, but we'll see in the future. And I just thought, you know, the money that everyone knows, and Darren may know more about the details of this, but the funding for private schools has been increasing rapidly. They promote themselves. Your kid will get a better education with us because we've got smaller classes. At the same time, we've got, oh, won't make a difference on the other. This affects every social class, affects every community. I cannot believe this government has walked into
Your
this.
thoughts on her future as being leader?
I think, you know, her and Shane Jones were both potentials for the first Prime Minister who is Māori. I think this week, both of them are out.
Darian, in May 2005, when asked by the New Zealand Listener why he sent his kids to private schools, the Prime Minister answered, mostly for educational reasons. Their schools have smaller classes and a better resource than most public schools. Isn't there a double standard and a hypocrisy here?
Of course there is. And actually when you look at, there's a number of national ministers that send their children to private schools. It's been a really bad week for the government, but it's also been a bad week for young people generally. We've got frozen fees and funding in early childhood education. We've got cuts to student loans. We've got obviously the class sizes, which has been a real disaster. But also they've been raiding the pocket money of the paper boys, paper girls, the kids that work after school. So you know, it's been a really bad week for young people, and I think they underestimated the whole debate really. What I think Mr Key and Hekia Parata thought they could do is get away with the argument around performance pay and quality teachers, and people wouldn't notice the thing about class sizes. Actually, Matt's right, you know, it's the thing that parents notice most. Everybody knows who's been a parent or is a parent. They know that it matters how much attention in the classroom their child has.
So you think that the argument about national standards was more a theoretical one, and parents could go either way on that, but classroom sizes, that's something that they can actually put a stake in the ground over.
That's right, and I think if they'd just gone for the performance pay argument and the quality teacher argument, they might have won that one. Because people, it's not well understood by parents. Everybody goes, oh, we want a good teacher, the highest quality teacher. They could have got away with that, but combining it with reducing class sizes has completely, well, it's a failure.
Well, it's going to knock out both now. They're going to lose on both. I think this government has set its own trap. It's not going to happen now. I was amazed. It shows the inexperience, I think, of Parata, because what you actually had is that when the question was asked, which schools are affected,
Yeah.
she hadn't even known.
Yeah, yeah,
Now, those who are in the political game know, when you're going to roll out sort of something you know is going to get some political fact, you better do your homework.
Yes,
And what she did is one call to her ministry would have got those figures for her, because as soon as an MP who's trying to keep their electorate realises they've got schools who can lose 7 teachers before the next election, guess what? They aren't going to go down for her. And I think that's part of her problem.
Can the Ministry of Education carry out these cost-cutting measures when every single association
Not now.
and union are against
Not
it?
now.
Well, look, Hekia says that the education sector will get used to losing 2 teachers per school. That's what she said.
Yep, and just keep digging a hole. You know?
That's right. How many education ministers have gone down on that one?
You know, that most ministers of education never come out unscathed.
That's right.
Yeah.
This one is going to be no exceptions, but I think it's going to be more brutal because she doesn't even get it.
Right.
Because once the unions in the education system, every teacher, it's their profession, they're all in it. It's a bit like cops and firefighters, right? They know about it's a profession, they care. So they're powerful, well-resourced unions, and they're very smart. They're very good operators. Now they've got the trustees, they've got the principals, they've got everyone on side, and the teachers group. I mean, and parents. You know, there's no way out, and I think now she's whistling. And hoping the game will change. But,
Darian, what would Labor be doing differently right now? How would you fund smaller classroom sizes, and what is the ideal ratio you want to see under Labor?
Well, we had a program of decreasing or increasing the ratios, decreasing.
Yep.
And because we do believe the evidence shows that the smaller ratios work better and mean better outcomes, we've promised that we will reverse these changes. What we say, I mean, you know, we can always talk about how tight money is, but it is about priorities and choices, and educating our kids. If we're serious about building our country and making it a better place for people to be, so our kids aren't wandering off overseas like mine have. We have to put education as an absolute priority, and you have to follow. You know, it has to be on an evidence base. And I think there are arguments around class sizes, which have been from the Treasury, which has been really interesting. Treasury saying that class sizes don't matter. It's highly flawed. It goes against the arguments in the research that that's out there.
Treasury currently haven't been able to get one single economic forecast right in 4 years. They have continually overplayed our growth levels. They have been wrong repeatedly. Why are they giving advice on education now?
Well, I think that's a really good question. I mean, I was gobsmacked when I saw that advice coming through. I mean, they give advice on all sorts of things, and you know, governments are free to ignore it, but it seems like this government's taken it seriously, which is crazy.
This country in the OECD is always up there in its education
That's
performance.
right,
Always is. We have an outstanding education system in this country. And what happens is the Tories just can't help themselves, you know. They think it's a business. And that somehow you've got to tingle with it. They don't want to listen to the students, they don't want to listen to the teachers, they don't want to listen to the parents. They've got their own ideological thing. And they just keep doing it. But I think this time they've picked an issue now which I think will be the unravelling of them.
Final question, both of you. How much industrial disruption can New Zealand expect in education right now?
Well, the NZDI is coming up for their collective agreement negotiations. They're collecting claims right now. I think class sizes are going to be at the top of the list, so I think there will be disruption. There's not just from teachers, but also from the whole education sector.
No, they're going to have support from everyone on this. Yes, I mean, the game has changed in 1 week, and I think that the class size, everyone understands that. That's the problem. But here's the thing: is they're right to some extent, right? You know, I was speaking to a teacher friend of mine who's been teaching for 3 decades, and what he was saying is, yes, class sizes don't matter to some extent. If all your kids have breakfast, all your kids have got books at home, they actually, you know, the education is saying. Where you need the smaller classes, particularly, is the kids who are struggling, you know, and in the poorer sort of areas where they don't have books at home. And so it's just madness to actually take teachers out. In fact, I think there is a case to actually put more teachers in, and they'll be very popular.
Thank you, panel. Moving on with issue 2, much discussion this week online between Labor and the Greens jostling each other for the left vote. So who is more of an ally to the union movement, the Greens or Labor? Matt, Brian Easton, in an essay released this week, says the left in New Zealand need to create an alternative dialogue on economics. The Greens have attempted that with a green economy approach.
Yep.
Is that enough to win support from the unions?
I think the Greens have been getting a lot of support from from unionists, and I think their policies, in some extent, have been more progressive than Labor on some issues.
Yep.
But that Labor will always have a strong hold on the working class vote.
Yep.
Always will, always
Yep.
has, because it is a party which come out of the union movement. It come out of the work thing. The Greens, I think, will actually be very good for workers in the sense of that people like Darren, who head up the work for workers in the Labour Party, sometimes it's good to have both parties competing for the workers' vote.
Right.
And I think so I think it's been healthy, you know, that Darren will know, and I know, how hard at times it's been to get Labor on side on some issues, with MMP, with the growth of the Greens, who have actually made a priority in focusing on working class or workers' rights. I think it's been good for both parties. But if you ask me in an election, you know, where workers will line up, I would say about a 3-1 to Labor.
Right.
You know, and that's unlikely to change.
Darren, in the face of the largest economic recession since the Great Depression, what is the theoretical economic structure Labor are providing that's an alternative to the National Party free market format? David Cunliffe says Labor needs to move beyond failed free market doctrine. Does it?
Well, I think you've seen, you know, the program that we took to the last election was described by one prominent unionist as the most progressive since Norman Kirk, and that included the economic program. That was the, you know, the things like CGT, reforming monetary policy, you know, so on and so on. But also, I mean, our industrial relations policy too. And I would argue, Matt, that ours is far ahead of the Greens in that. I mean, I actually don't think it is a contest.
No, no,
you know, I think the union
right.
movement needs all the allies it can get, and particularly now when you know we're getting to some pretty difficult times.
Yeah. I think that Labor's policy has moved more progressively in those areas, and I think I'm not giving the credit to the Greens, but I think them pushing it as an issue has actually helped those who are in the Labour Party and pulling it across and being more pro-worker than I think that traditionally it has been.
Right.
Yeah, but then, you know, I've just been at a Service and Food Workers Union whānau, you know, and so Matt's right. I mean, those people are Labour, and that's not going to change.
Right.
The dialogue, you know, the discussion about who's the greatest ally is irrelevant to them. For them, it's about getting a government in power that's going to make a difference to their lives. You know, they can see what's happening. One of them stood up and asked David Shearer today, you know, what's going to stop their kids going to Australia? I mean, that's what they're experiencing. They want their kids to be in good education. They want to be able to have good jobs, want to be able to have good wages. And that's what matters to them.
Right.
But let me give you an example, right? You've got Shearer who says raise the retirement age.
Yes.
Now, you know, is it a workers' issue? On the surface, not.
Right.
But actually it is. You know, Pacific Island people, Māori people, blue-collar workers statistically die a lot earlier.
That's right.
So when you say, oh, we need to drill the real question, let's raise it to 67, is Labor addressing the factors? We've got MPs who are 65 are receiving the pension, as many people in the workforce are, and yet we've got them saying, oh, how we'll address that problem, we'll just raise the age. So that people are getting very modest wages and in crummy jobs can stay there for another
Although
2 years.
David did actually, he certainly flagged this week, didn't he, that he might think about lowering that retirement age for people who have been in very hard labour employment because of that very issue, hasn't he?
He did do that, and I mean we are talking about 20 years away too, so it's you know, it's a long introduction to it. Look, it's a very, very difficult issue, and I suppose what I've had in my mind about it, Matt's right about workers, and we need to look after them and make sure that they can retire, and the ones that you know are likely to need to retire earlier. But I was thinking about, been thinking about the younger people too coming through, and will we have a pension scheme at all for them?
No, we won't.
Yeah, right.
And that's I think that's what's driving our policies, making sure that there's, you know, there will be a universal super scheme in the future.
But no, I want to address this just go very quickly. KiwiSaver was set up by Labor, right? And it's a privatised pension scheme, and it's intended to take the place of university super. Come on, you know, that's where it's going. And I think that what the super will become in the end, it will underwrite it, but you're not going to get both.
If, as David argues, Labor lost the last election because they were still effectively following the same failed free market structures, who should the union support? I mean, Mana is the only party putting forward a financial transaction tax that would challenge that hegemonic status quo.
Well, the financial transaction tax is actually is caught on in Europe big time, and I noticed in the French presidential elections, both of the candidates were pushing a financial transaction tax.
Yeah.
But you know, it is going to rock the boat here. I think that Labor adopting the capital gains tax is starting to change that dynamic. It seems extraordinary to me how we make income. We put it on GST, so the poorest pay, and then we put it on people earning an income. Yet those who are rich already don't get touched.
That's right. That's
and
right.
So, yeah.
Darian, there has been some criticism that David Shearer has taken Labor to the right and hasn't been as visible as a Labor leader should be on issues like the Ports of Auckland dispute and Tally's AFCO. What would Labor do to give the unions teeth?
Well, we have a very comprehensive policy, that I've mentioned, which is about a number of things. One is about building stronger unions, enabling collective bargaining, because in the end we want unions to have the strength to do it for themselves.
Absolutely.
We don't want government to have to do it for them, but also recognising that we have a wages issue in this country, we have a low wages issue, so in the meantime we have to have a mechanism that enables all of the workers, 90% of workers who aren't covered by collective bargaining, to have a system of collective bargaining, a form of collective bargaining with arbitration involved in that, to make sure that they're actually getting a decent wage as well. So I mean, we've got a very comprehensive policy around that. We've also got comprehensive policy around the other big problem facing the union movement, but workers generally, which is about non-standard work.
Right.
You know, contractors, labour hire workers, those sorts of. That's a huge and growing problem, not just in New Zealand, but right across the world. So we've got policy that addresses that too.
The Spirit Level suggests as one of the solutions to the social inequality that you get in society are stronger union movements. Would Labor ever look at compulsory unionism?
Well, I think it's always up for debate. And one of the things that's different about us and the Greens is, as you know, we have affiliated unions, the private sector unions, so that debate does happen within the Labor Party. They bring it to the conference, they debate it. In fact, the affiliate unions are essentially in charge of developing our industrial relations policy. So it's, we never say that debate's over. But I guess Matt and my experience about compulsory unionism, and Matt may disagree with me on this, but my experience of that was come 1990 in the Employment Relations Act, and the Service Workers Union lost thousands and thousands and thousands of members. And part of it was the Employment Contracts Act, but also because I had people saying to me, look, I didn't want to belong to the union, I'm really pleased I'm resigning. So, I think in some ways it made us weaker, but it's never ruled out. It's always
and I don't think as compulsory, that's not going to happen, and no one is really pushing it. But the thing is, what people need to understand is that employment relationships is a relationship of power. An employer being able to sack you is always in a position of power that people, by the nature of it, have to balance that power relationship, and they do it collectively through a union. And so, when you run a business, you're paying your workers. The workers are going to get a better deal if they do it collectively than individually, of course. And so it's how you do it. Now, an employer, and most employers, and Darren and I have come from this background, are in this world, is that they want lots of non-members because then they can drive the wages down. And that's what they've done. It's been quite strategic, and the Act, as it is now, allows that. Passing on and to give better deals to non-unions. My sense is, I think there is a time for a debate about those in a collective agreement have a vote, and it applies to everybody in it. And they do it, and the boss can't pick them all off. I think that's the key, because what we want is the mechanisms to even the power relationship, to drive the wages up and the conditions up. Because there's no power, we've just been dropping, since Darian was the Secretary of the Service and Food Workers Union, that real wages for our the low pay workers have dropped 25% in real terms. That's the fact, and on to casual and contracting jobs now.
Thank you, panel. Moving on with issue 3, the latest meme by the right wing is that workers don't want to work when offered $13.50 an hour. Is it a case of lazy workers or the legacy of our low-wage economy? Matt, bosses are complaining people don't want to work for our incredibly low hourly wage. John Key says maybe workers from the Philippines would like to pick up work here. Is importing labour the answer?
Oh, of course not, and it's just silly. No, that workers do want to work. What happened is, and one of the examples we had was what they hinged it on, an employee said, look, I've been advertising a cleaning job for $20 an hour and I can't get anyone to work. Well, as soon as he said it, he was inundated with applications, and he had no problem getting a job. We know that every time, you know, one of the big supermarkets sort of opens up in town, they get thousands of applications. Now, what you do is you have small employers, you know, who they haven't got the facility to advertise, and so they go to the WINS or they go to something and say, can you get the workers in? Now, they pay them on the minimum wage, you know, there's nothing else. The conditions are very thing, you know, now I'm not blaming them, I'm just saying, yes, I think that small employers wrestle with it, but when people are offered a job, they're very keen to have it. There'll always be some people who slack. I get that. You know,
sure.
But by and large, and so what they do is they're looking at the ad hoc stories and making it into a policy. It's just silly.
Yeah, Darian, the minimum wage increased most under Labor, but the low wage legacy from the Employment Contracts Act suppressed unions' ability to raise wages. Where does Labor see the minimum wage, and what extra muscle will you give unions to drive those wages up even further?
Well, I mean, we've got a policy and, in fact, a members' bill for $15 an hour, which has been there, and if, you know, a couple of other parties, Peter Dunn, for example, across the floor, we could get that through as a members' bill. But that's now, and $15 has been around for a while. We're getting behind the living wage campaign. I think what's great about that is I think it will change the conversation in New Zealand about what's affordable, or we can't afford this and we can't afford to pay people properly, which is what we hear all the time. And it will change the conversation to what kind of society we want, what people need to live on, but most of all, what they need to participate, because that's what we saw in the last election, nearly 1 million people not voting. They're just completely alienated from our society because they're just trying to get along, feed their kids and get on with their family. And as I said, we'll strengthen collective bargaining and we'll go to a system of industry standards.
So do you think living wage, focus on that's about autonomy, allowing citizens to actually be autonomous in society, to have the money to be able to participate?
Yes, I think it's about that, and as I say, I also think it's about a different conversation than the one we've been having for many, many years, and it gets back to your question about the economy, you know, and the ideological system that we've had for so long. It gets around, you know, because we have to bring people with us, and part of that's what's been successful about the Living Wage campaign in the UK and others, is they've been able to get people on board that didn't normally see themselves as part of that. The funniest story, I mean, Annie Newman may have told you this, but the funniest story I heard, I think it was Lloyd's, one of those big banks, who said, yes, we'll be a living wage employer, but didn't realise it had to apply to their cleaning contractors as well. You know, to be a living wage employer, actually, it's those people that they don't see at night. So, you know, that's the beauty of that. But
Matt, is it in the interest of employers to depress wage prices if the result is an hourly wage that is unappealing, or is it just lazy workers?
No, it's lazy management, sort of, actually. I mean, the wages here are too low, and what we've got is a management, not class, but a management culture in this country. It's where it's like, to make a profit, you depress the wages. And there used to be a time when, of course, you set up a business and you said, you know, this is the price of labor I will have to pay for people to work. It was seen as, you know, that's what you do. Now it's like the minimum wage becoming a paid wage in a lot of things. And what they do is you know, it's a lazy approach, and then they want their workers to be, you know, I'm really with you, you know. And you think they won't guarantee them a full-time job. They'll pay them a minimum wage, and then why are they so disloyal to me? You know, so that slavery has never been a thing in this country. In other parts of the world, it went out 100 years ago. But you know, we've got to get out of that culture. And when you set up a business, you should be saying, you know, what is the price I need to pay my workers so they can have a decent life, you know, not what can I get away with. And that's culture, and that's going to change. That's why the Living Wage campaign is very exciting.
Darian, if we want to talk about catching up to Australia and being aspirational, is $15 an hour too low? Should we be trying to aim to match the Australian minimum wage? Wouldn't that do more to bring New Zealanders back from Australia than anything else?
Well, possibly, and remember, Australians have a range of living wages, so it's not just the, minimum wage, it's not just the one that we hear about all the time, because they still have awards. They still have a system of industry-based bargaining and wage fixing.
Well, what's a cleaner in Sydney on about 24?
$20 an hour, minimum wage, but 24 an hour.
That's right, yes. You can see why you would want to go to Australia if you had those skills.
Well, that's believing. I mean, look at Kaitaia. We had that, you know, oh, that's very high unemployment in the country. You know, these people, they don't want to work. They put an ad in there from Australia. This is a town of 5,000. 600 applied for jobs. 600. See, that's what this government and this culture has turned us into.
Thank you, panel. Let's wrap the show with a final word. Matt, your final word this week is?
Well, my final word is this. I've been very excited about, over the recent 2 or 3 weeks, how at long last you see that workers are willing to stand up for themselves right across the board, whether it's in rest homes, whether it was ports, was the big example we started off this year, but the AFCO, the meat workers there, that was extraordinary. But here's the difference, which I've never seen before. It's now outreach into the community. New Zealanders are getting your fight is my fight. And the Māori communities and the iwi leaders particularly engaged in the meat workers. These workers have been up for 13 weeks, locked out by a vicious employer. The Māori with the economic weight said, fix this or we will not be supplying you. We'll have problems in fisheries as well. And Tallies, which led this attack on thousands of workers, caved. And I think that is the most, it's almost like you see a light there that New Zealanders now, we're no longer on our own. With the ports and with all these workers, we say your fight's our fight and we'll come out and support you. And I think there's been a significant change which has been healthy.
Darren, your final word this week is?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm excited by that as well, but I'm also worried about what's going on with the government, the proposed employment law changes, and particularly their review of Part 6A of the Employment Relations Act, which is the one around what happens to vulnerable workers when their employer changes hands or contractors. And that's very much a service workers argument, and you know, your members as well, Matt.
Right.
And there's been some really sneaky dealing going on behind the scenes about that. The minister's been, it's been reviewed, but she hasn't reported it back. So she's now brought in consultants to have another look at it, headed by Graham Scott from the Treasury. That's worrying.
We know what that is.
And then there's a company called Quest Clean, who is one of the sort of outliers of the industry, who are pushing very, very hard, and now claim to have industry support from the cleaning industry to have it ditched. So you know, I'm worried about that, and I think we need to keep a very close eye on that, because I mean, all the changes they're proposing are worrying.
Always anti-worker.
But that one is shocking. That will have
shocking.
huge impact on people.
And for our viewers, I mean, your viewers, sorry, I mean, it's very clear what employers do: contract everything out and get someone to do it cheaper. And that's what that thing is about.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Darian. That's it for the show. Check out our Facebook site for ongoing union campaigns and actions, and follow me on my Citizen Bomber Twitter account for all the latest show updates. Thank you for watching Aotearoa. Join us again 8 p.m. next Monday for the Union Report here on Triangle TV, the home of original public broadcasting. Good night, New Zealand.